Masechet Sanhedrin Daf Yod Zayin. We continue with the Mishnah that said Sanhedrin Gedolah Shivim Ve'echad Uktana Shel Esrim Ushlosha, that the great Sanhedrin has 71 judges in it, whereas a smaller Sanhedrin is 23. And what's the source that a Sanhedrin Gedolah is 71? From the pasuk when Moshe appoints 70 elders, and so says, gather 70 elders, and Moshe was above them. He was part of that group. So that's 70 elders plus Moshe, we get 71. That's according to Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda, however, says, no, it's 70 altogether. Moshe appointed them, but he is not included among them. And so therefore, the Sanhedrin also is only 70 sages. So let's analyze Sanhedrin Gedolah Ita. Ma'ita ma'od Rabbanan da'amri Moshe al gabehen. What is the source for Rabbanan, who says that Moshe is among and in charge and ahead of that group, but he is counted among them, and therefore it's 71. Amar kera v'hityatzebu sham imach ve'at behadaihu. Because the pasuk says, let's look at the pasuk inside. ויאמר אדוני אל משה אספליז 70 איש מזקני ישראל אשר ידעתי כי הם זקני העם ושותריו ולקחת אותם אל המועד והתייצבו שם עמך. Hashem tells Moshe to gather 70 elders and take them to Ohel Moed, and they will stand there with you. So they're learning from here, stand there with you means that you are also part of them, you are among them. The Gemara in a second is going to quote the next pasuk also. That says, and so on, that they will bear the burden of the people together with you. So now, coming back to the Gemara, we know the source for Tanakama. They learn it from Imach, that they will be with you. That means you, Moshe, are counted among them. That's 71. What is Rabbi Yehuda going to do with that pasuk? Rabbi Yehuda, Imach, Mishum Shechina. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, Moshe is not counted among the group. It's only 70. But Moshe needs to be there because Moshe is the conduit by which the Shekhinah will come down through Moshe, overflow from Moshe, and that's how the elders receive prophecy. So Moshe needs to be there so that the elders can receive prophecy. But Moshe is not actually counted among them. Rabbanan, so that's a good point. So now, Rabbanan, how are you going to counter that? Don't you need Moshe to be there, to be the conduit for prophecy? Amar kera v'nasu itecha b'masa'am itecha ve'at ba'adaihu. Rabbanan says, okay, you're right. I'll leave that pasuk ab imach as according to what you say, but I have the next pasuk that says that they will bear the burden of the people together with you. With you means you, Moshe, are counted among them, and that's how we get 71. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, I use that pasuk for something else, to teach that the 70 elders have to be similar to you, Moshe. They have to have similar character traits in order to be worthy to be elders. That's what it means, itecha, but Moshe himself is not counted. V'Rabbanan, me v'hakel me'alecha v'nasu itach nafka v'yalfa sanedri gedola misanedri ketana. So the rabbis can learn the lesson that the elders have to be similar to Moshe in their character traits from a different pasuk altogether, the one that we quoted yesterday from Yitro's advice to Moshe, that he should appoint lower courts, and so that the lower courts will make it easier for you and bear the burden with you. Nasu itach. So from this word itach, we can learn that the judges that are appointed to those lower courts have to be similar to Moshe. And we will learn from the lower courts to the higher court, right? We'll learn from the Sanhedrin Gedolah that the judges there have to be like Moshe, from the lower courts of 23 that they also have to be like Moshe. So we can learn that lesson, that they have to be like Moshe, from this pasuk in Shemot, and that leaves the pasuk in Bemidbar open to learn that Moshe is counted among the elders, and that's how Rabbanan gets 71. Tenor Rabbanan, vayisha'aru shnei anashim b'machaneh yesh omrim bekalpi nishtayeru. Since we talked about the appointment of the 70 elders, we're going to have a derasha that elaborates on that story further. And part of the story is that Moshe gathered the 70 elders, and then Vayered Adonai ba'anan vayidaber elav vayasim min haruach asher alav vayiten al 70 ish hazikenim v'kanoach alem haruach v'nabeu ve'lo yasafu. So we're going to analyze this pasuk that Hashem came down and the spirit that was on Moshe, he gave some of it to the 70 elders, and then the spirit rested upon them. They prophesied, and we'll to see what this means. Velo yasafu, but they did not continue, or does it mean that they did not stop? Okay, anyway, that's about the 70 elders. But then there were two other people, Vayisharu Shene Anashim B'Machane, Shema Echad Eldad V'Shema Sheni Medad. These two people remained in the camp. In other words, all the 70 went to Ohel Moed, and so they were prophesying there. But two remained behind in the camp. We'll see why. V'tanach alehem haruach v'hema b'ketubim. But the Spirit of Hashem also went upon them, and they were among those who were written. That's a curious word. Written where? The Gemara will explain. V'lo yasu ha'olah. They stayed in the camp. They did not go to Ohel Moed. Vayitnabeu b'machaneh. However, even though they were not in Ohel Moed, but at the camp, nevertheless, they were able to prophesy at the camp. Someone came and told Moshe that they're prophesying in the camp, and this was not authorized. So Yeshua tells Moshe to stop them. We'll see exactly what this means as well. And Moshe says, This is what? Are you envy for my sake? I wish that everybody would be a prophet, and Hashem would put His Spirit among them. Okay, so now let's go back to the Gemara and analyze what this means. So the two people, Eldad and Medad, that remained in the camp and were prophesying. So why were they in the camp? So there's a couple of interpretations. The first one is that there was a lottery, and using a box, a kalpi is a box that's used for a lottery, and their names remained in the box. Now, why did they do a lottery? As follows: Shebisha'a shemar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe esfali shib'im ish miziknei Israel. Amar Moshe kesed I when Hashem told Moshe, gather 70 elders from among all of Israel. Moshe says, how am I going to do that? If I choose 6 from each of the tribes, 6 times 12 is 72. Then you're going to have 2 extra. I only need 70. If I take only 5 from every tribe, then that'll be only 60, and I'll be missing 10. I need 70. If I take 6 from some tribes and 5 from other tribes to make up 70, then I'm going to bring about jealousy between the tribes. He wants to make sure that all the tribes are represented equally, so that there's no competition and envy among them. Right? Well, this is one reason why Moshe is a great leader. He wants to make sure that none of the tribes will start fighting, and so he wants to make it totally fair. So here's what he did. He picked 6, meaning 6 from every tribe. Now that'll be 72 altogether. He also brought 72 slips of parchment or whatever, or wood, whatever they were made out of. On 70 of them he wrote an elder, and 2 of them he left empty. He mixed them up and put them in a box. So then he told all the 72 elders, everybody come and pick out 1 slip from the box. If anyone got the word zaken on the slip that they picked out, then Moshe said, heaven has already sanctified you. You are chosen to be one of the 70. And if someone picked out the empty one, that would be 2 out of the 72 would pick out empty ones. Moshe says, Hashem does not desire you, has not chosen you. What can I do? It's not up to me. I'm leaving it up to chance / Hashem's providence, and that way it would be totally fair, and no one can complain, why'd you pick more from that tribe, why'd you pick him and not me? Moshe says, I'm leaving it up to the lottery. There's another instance in which also Moshe would have needed to leave something up to a lottery. When you had originally the Bechor, the firstborn, were the religious leaders, but then Hashem said, "Okay, we're going to replace them. No longer the firstborn, but now the Leviim." And now it happens to be that there were 22,000 people that matched up, 22,000 Bechorim, and so they transferred their holy special status to 22,000 Leviim. That's good. The problem is there was an additional 273 firstborn, and there was no Levi to replace them to redeem their holiness. And so instead, 273 out of the total 22,273 had to pay 5 shekels each person. Now, how are you gonna choose which of that 22,273, which 273 are going to pay? Everybody's going to say, why should I pay? I'm the one, I'm attached to this levy. Everybody's going to say, I'm attached to one of the 22,000 leviim, and nobody's going to be the one, part of the 273 that have to pay. Amar Moshe, kesada eseh lahen l'Yisrael. Im omar lo ten li pidyon necha vaseh, yomar li kebar peda ani ben Navi. Moshe says, how am I going to do this? If I tell any one particular firstborn, hey, give me the amount, give me 5 shekalim, and then you can go free. He will say, no, I'm already connected to one of the Leviim that redeemed me. Why'd you pick me? Pick somebody else. Me'asa, so what Moshe do? Hebi asrim u'shnayim alafim pitakin v'katab alehen ben Levi, v'al shalosha v'shivim u'matayim katab alehen 5 shekalim. So he brought 22,000 slips of parchment, and he wrote on each one Levi. And then he took another 273 slips, and he wrote on them 5 shekalim. Belalan unetanan bekalpi. He mixed them up and put them in a box. Amalehem telu pi takechem. So he told all of the firstborn, everybody come and pick out a slip. Mishala biado ben Levi amar lo kevad pedacha ben Levi. Mishala biado 5 shekalim amar lo 10 pidyonecha vaseh. Whoever picked out a ben Levi, he'll say, okay, you were redeemed already by Levi. And any of the firstborn that picked out a slip that says 5 shekalim, he said, okay, you have to pay your redemption of 5 shekalim, and then you can leave. Rabbi Shimon omed b'machaneh nishtayiru b'shah she'amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu leMoshe esfali 70 ish amru Eldad uMedad en anu re'uyin le'ota gedula. And so now back to the story of Eldad uMedad. We saw that first interpretation is everybody wanted to make sure to be one of the 70, and so Moshe had to make a lottery. Now Rabbi Shimon gives a different interpretation altogether, which is that Eldad Medad volunteered to stay behind in the encampment because of their modesty. So here's how it works. At the time that Hashem told Moshe, gather 70 elders for me, Eldad Medad said, we are not worthy for such a high appointment. Right? Who are we that we should be among the 70 of the greatest elders of the whole nation? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem saw that they were humble about themselves, so he says, because you lowered yourself, I'm going to add even more greatness to your already great position. ומה גדולה אוסיף להם שהנביאים כולם נתנבאו פסקו והם נתנבאו ולא פסקו. What greatness did Hashem give to Eldad uMedad? He gave them greatness in that the other 70, they had prophecy and then they stopped. But Eldad uMedad, they also got to receive prophecy, but their prophecy did not stop. They continued, which shows that really they were even greater. What did they say when they were prophesying in the camp? What were they saying? Amru Moshe met Yoshua machnis et Yisrael haaretz. They prophesied that Moshe will die and he will not go into the land, but rather Yoshua will bring the people into the land. Abba Chanin Omer, Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, al iske selav hen mitnabein, ali selav. Abba Chanin says, well, look at the context. B'machaneh, the next part of the story is that the selav, they all complained that we want meat, and then the quail fell down in the machaneh. So what were they prophesying? It makes sense about what's going to happen next. They were prophesying and saying, arise quail, and then the quail came. Rav Nachman Amar al Iske Gog uMagog hayu mitnabeim. A third opinion, Rav Nachman says, they were prophesying about Gog uMagog, this enemy that in the future times is going to come against Israel. Shneimar Ko Amar Hashem Elokim Ha'atahu asher dibarti b'yamim kadmonim b'yad abadai nebi'ei Yisrael hanebim b'yamim ahem shanim. This is a key word. Lavi otecha alehem vegomed al tikre shanim ela shenayim. Pasuk in Yechezkel, Hashem says, "Are you the ones whom I spoke in ancient days through my servants, the prophets of Israel, who prophesied in those days for many years that I would bring you against them?" So in simple reading is Shanim, for many years I sent prophecies about this. So he says, don't read Shanim, but rather Shenayim, the two. And so who is this referring to? That the two people that prophesied at the same time about the very same message. Eldad Medad is referring to Eldad Medad. So what did they prophesy about? They were saying that far in the future, there's going to be this war about Gog uMagog, and Yechezkel was referring back to the two, Eldad uMedad. Amar Mor, Kol Nevim Kolein Nabeu Pasku, Vehen Nitnabeu, Velo Pasku. So that was all long Baraita. And now let's go and analyze that part of the Braita that said all of the prophets, they prophesied, but then they stopped, whereas Eldad Medad did not stop. Minalan de Pasku. How do you know that all the other prophets stopped? Maybe because it says they prophesied and did not continue. The word yasafu, it could mean they didn't stop, as in sof, but it could also mean lo yasafu, like lehosif. They did it no more. So we're reading it that way, that they prophesied and then they did not continue anymore to prophesy. If you're going to read it that way, then we have to use the same meaning in Devarim when it's talking about the Matan Torah and the Ten Commandments on Har Sinai. Ela me'ata kol gadol velo yasaf. There also it says it was a great sound, velo yasaf. Are you going to say that also means the same thing? Hachinami de la osifu, that it did not continue? That wouldn't make sense in the context there. Ela de lo pasaku. There it means it did not stop. So to here, when we say ve'yitnabeu velo yasafu, that should mean that they prophesied and did not stop. So we don't have a source. What's the source that the other prophets stopped? Elacha ketiv ve'yitnabeu hatam ketiv mitnabeim adayin mitnabein ve'olchin. Rather, the source is not from the word velo yasafu, but rather from the tense of the verb. Regarding the 70 elders, it says in past tense, vayitnabeu, they had prophesied, and then they stopped. Whereas for Eldad uMedad, the report says that these two people, mitnabeim, they are continuing to prophesy in the camp. And so that means they are prophesying and they are not stopping. So that's how we derive that the two, Eldad uMedad, were prophesying and continuing to prophesy even after the 70 had stopped. Now, we understand according to the opinion that says they were prophesying that Moshe is going to die, then it makes sense why Yoshua came and said, Moshe, stop them, imprison them, right? They're saying something negative about you. But according to the other two opinions, that they were prophesying about the Selaf or about Gog uMagog, so then what's the problem? Why did Yoshua say, stop them? What's wrong with them prophesying about those subjects? And the answer is, and the answer is, the problem wasn't about the subject matter, it's just that it was not proper conduct for a student to be teaching in front of the master. The same thing, you have the master prophet here, Moshe, so it wasn't their place to continue prophesying, even though there was no problem with what they were saying. Still, it was not authorized, and they were doing so in front of Moshe, so that's why Yeshua said, I think we should stop them. Now we understand, according to the other two opinions, Moshe's reaction. Says, I wish everyone would be a prophet. It's so nice. They're talking about the Salav. They're helping out with the people, with the leadership. They're talking about Gog uMagog. They're giving important prophecies for the future. This is me 10. I wish everybody would be doing that. But according to the first opinion that says Eldad and Medad were prophesying that Moshe had died, Moshe is okay with that. Oh yeah, I wish everybody would keep talking negatively about me. Why would he want everybody to be saying that? And the answer is La Siyamua Kameh. No, when Moshe didn't know what they were saying. When that message came to Moshe, they only started the message as, listen, there's two people that are continuing to prophesy in the camp, but they did not finish the report and say exactly what they were saying. So Moshe actually didn't know that they were saying Moshe is going to die. And so that's why he said, I wish everybody would be a prophet. Now, my kilaem, when Yeshua said stop them, right, imprison them, what does that mean? Literally imprison them? Interesting answer. What Yeshua really was saying is, put the needs of the public upon them. Appoint them for a position to be an official over the Jewish people, and then they'll be occupied all day long with people's problems and solutions and all that, and they will start prophesying on their own. This is similar to the way many of the sages themselves in the time of the Talmud, they wished that they would not get appointed to an official position, because then they'd have to deal with all these problems all day long, which is very important for sure, but it will cut into their ability to learn Torah. And so too, to be a prophet, you have to really concentrate on very high and spiritual things. And so one way to stop someone from prophesying, if you don't want to imprison them, is simply to give them a high honor of a position of authority over the people, and then they'll be so busy with that, they won't have time to meditate and achieve prophecy. We now analyze the next part of the Mishnah, Minayin lehavi od shelosha. If we look back at the Mishnah, this is talking about the derivation of a court of 23 judges. We learn that from V'shafetu ha'edah v'silu ha'edah. Edah is 10, and that's 10 pro and 10 against, but that would be even. So we need to have an odd number. And furthermore, in order to make someone guilty of a capital punishment, you have to win by 2. As we learned from here, right? Not by a simple majority. And so therefore we're going to have to add 2 more. So we have 10 this way, 10 that way. And you have to win by 2, so that's 22. And you cannot have an even number. And that's how we got to 23. So let's analyze this. Sof sof l'ra'a al pi shenayim lamash kachatla. In the end, once you're adding another extra one in order to get an odd number, it's impossible to have a case where someone would be found guilty by just 2 votes. Because what's the possibilities? Out of the 23 judges, if you have 11 that say he is not guilty and 12 that say he is guilty, akate hadhu, that's only winning by 1, and actually we wouldn't give him capital punishment in that case. So let's flip one of those judges, and then we'll have 10 acquitting and 13 saying he is guilty. And then that is winning by 3, not by 2. So actually the example in the Pasuk, Lo tiacharei rabim l'ra'ot, that you cannot kill someone based on a simple majority of 1, but rather you need 2, you can never have such a case, because with an odd number, if you have to win by 2, then you're necessarily going to be winning by 3. אמר רבי אבהו, אי אתה מוסה אלא במוסיפין ודברי הכל, ובסנהדרין גדולה ודיברת רבי יהודה דאמר 70. Rabbi Abu says, I have 2 answers. Number 1, when you're adding extra judges, what happens is, let's say, the judges are split out of 23, 11 versus 11, and 1 abstains. The one guy that abstains says, I don't know, I can't vote. So now we only have 22 judges voting, and it's even, so we have to add 2 more. The Mishnah will teach later. And so we add 2 more, and we see if they both rule one way or the other, then that will be the decision. And if they both rule guilty, well, then that will be 11 plus 2 will be 13 versus 11, right, out of the 24 voting judges. And so that's how you can have a case where you're winning by 2. And that would be according to everyone. In such a case, let's say it is 11 versus 11, and one person abstains, and then you add 2, and the 2 are split. Then you have 12 versus 12. You add another 2 and another 2, and you keep going until the 2 that you add will both vote a certain way. the same way, and then you will have a verdict. The other answer that Rabbi Abu says is regarding the Sanhedrin Gedolah, if we follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says it's 70. Well, 70 is an even number, and so you can, if they vote 35, 35 is exactly half, 34 to 36, 36 guilty, 34 innocent, well then you'd have a winning by 2 for guilt. Rabbi Abu also says basically the same thing as he said in the first answer above, that whenever you're adding 2 more because one person abstains, then you're necessarily going to have an even number, and you can do that lechatechila. It's totally fine, even though we have a general rule when we were deciding the size of each type of betin that has to be an odd number. But in the scenario where one person abstains, then you're going to add 2. So then you're always going to have an even number, and that's totally fine lechatechila. Peshita, we ask, isn't that obvious? Because you're adding 2. One abstain, you're adding 2, then you're always going to get an even number. What's he teaching us by saying this? Maudetema, hai de kamad eni yodea, keman diite da mevi amad mileta shaminan le. Kamashmalan hai de kamad eni yodea, keman delete da mevi amad ta'ama la shaminan le. Oh, Rabbi Abu is coming to teach us that the judge who abstains, I might have thought that it's as if he's still there, even though he's abstaining right now. And let's say during the deliberation, right, even though he abstained, now they bring 2 more and they're still, talking about it. If he would say, "Hold on, I want to offer an argument for this way or for that way," we might have thought that we can include his argument, and then he can come back and he's still part of the deliberation. He's still officially a judge. So we might have thought that he's still included in the judge, and therefore it's still an odd number. He didn't vote, so we have a problem because he's not voting, but we can always add 2 more, 25, but he's always part of a judge and he can always come back in. I might have thought that, and that's what Rabbi Abu says, not so. Once he abstains and says, "I don't know," then it's as if he's not there anymore. It's as if we kick him out of the room, whether he's physically there or not. He cannot come later on and say, "Hold on, I thought of something. I didn't know before, but now I see there's a reason to decide that he's guilty." No. Once you abstain, that basically you're recusing yourself off of the court, and that's why if there was 23, now there's 22, so you add 2 more, now there's 24. That's what Rabbi Abu wanted to teach when he said there's necessarily going to be an even number. Amar Rav Kahana, Sanhedrin shera'u kulan lechova potrin oto. Very famous and surprising law that if you have a Sanhedrin where all the judges decide the person is guilty, all 23 judges say that the person is guilty, then he goes free. That's very strange. If everybody said guilty, then you should think all the more so he should be guilty, right? If all but one say he's guilty and one judge says he's innocent, then we kill him. But if that extra judge also says guilty, then we let him go free. My ta'ama, what's the reason? The reason is because before you declare a verdict of guilt for capital punishment, we have to let the case stand overnight. In other words, everybody votes over here and we have a majority that said guilty. We don't issue a verdict. We say, everybody go home and think about it. And sometimes when you're sleeping in the heat of the day, while you're arguing, you're like so sure that the person's guilty. But then at night, you'll think about it more, and you'll think about one of your colleagues who gave an argument for innocence, and you'll think more about that, and you say, you know what, actually, I didn't think about it well enough during the day, and now that it's quiet here at night, and I'm meditating on it, I think my colleague who said innocent, I think they have a point. And then you'll come in the next day. So you need a chance for everyone to think about the arguments for innocence overnight. If in the next day they still think guilty, then fine, that'll be a capital punishment. So you need to have the possibility of suspending the trial overnight. Now, here's the problem. If on the first day it's unanimous that the person is guilty, then they're not giving them anything to think about at night. Everybody said guilty. There's only arguments for guilt. So there's not going to be anything to possibly think about at night. And therefore, you're skipping over that step of the procedure that you need to have some arguments on the table for innocent so that the judges can think about that at night. Basically, the point is that if you out of 23 judges, someone if they're really thinking critically, really thinking on both sides of the issue, someone should find a reason to say the person is innocent, even if it's like so obvious, but it means that no one is thinking critically if there's unanimous for guilt. And so everybody's just like biased against the person. And therefore we say you're not getting a fair trial, and he goes home. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, en moshibin besanedri ela ba'ale koma, ba'ale chokhma, ba'ale mar'eh, u'ba'ale zikna, u'ba'ale keshafim, b'yodim b'shivim lashon, shelo tesanedri shamat mepi hameturgeman. So we discussed before some of the character traits of being on being a judge, that they have to be similar to Moshe. And here we have a delineation of those character traits that we do not appoint someone to be on a Sanhedrin unless he is of tall stature. He has to be impressive, not only physically, but also in wisdom, pleasant of appearance, of suitable age, not too young. He has to has to garner respect of the people, and he has to know about magic. Why? Not because we wanted to do magic and sorcery, that's not allowed, but rather because there's going to be cases that come up of people who are of keshafim, and they have to know enough about it that they can judge such cases. And also they have to know 70 languages so that they are not hearing through a translator. Translator, you never know if the translator is translating accurately, so the judges have to hear the litigants themselves in whatever language they're going to speak, and 70 languages are all the languages. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, en moshim b'sanedrin ela mi sheyodeh letaher et hasheret min haTorah. Amar Rav, ani adun v'ataharenu. Rav Yehuda says, name of Rav, another very important and surprising law, that we do not appoint someone to be on the Sanhedrin unless they know how to give an argument that a sheretz is one of the 8 creepy crawlies, like a mouse, that if it's dead, has a very high level of tum'ah. A judge has to know how to give an argument that a sheretz is actually tahor from the Torah. That's surprising. Why would you need to know that? Like, it was like saying you can't get semicha unless you can prove that pig is kosher. Well, why would that be? Okay, obviously we don't want a judge to say that pig is kosher and that a sheretz is tahor, but the point is he has to be so adept at logical reasoning that he can argue anything. Why do we want someone that can argue anything? That sounds like what a good lawyer should do. Well, yes, in general, in Greco-Roman world, like today in America, a good lawyer can argue anything and get anybody out of any case. But here, the Talmud says we don't want the lawyer to have those skills, but rather we want the judge to have those skills. In fact, there is no place for lawyers in rabbinic courts and the Talmud, but rather we want the judge to be able to see through false arguments that any litigant might bring. And so if a litigant is going to bring some convoluted argument of a kal vachomer or something or else to show that he's innocent or that the other person is guilty or whatever, the judge has to be an expert in making up such convoluted arguments that are wrong so that he can see through the wrong arguments. So that's the point. And Rav says, I can do such a thing, right? I am worthy, and I know how to argue based on adun, means a kal vachomer, that a sheretz is tahor. And here is his kal vachomer. U'ma nachash shememit u'marbeh tumah tahor, sheretz she'eno memit u'marbeh tumah en odin she'yeheh tahor. A snake which kills. A snake can kill a person, and when it kills a person, it creates a corpse that is avi avot hatumah. So a snake causes tumah, yet a dead snake itself is tahor. A snake is not one of the 8 sherasim. It's not a creepy crawly. So if a snake that causes a lot of tumah itself is tahor, then a sheresh, just a mouse, which does not cause death, a mouse can't kill anybody, and does not increase tumah, all the more so it should be tahor. If a snake that doesn't cause other things to be tameh by killing them is itself tahor, then a sheretz that doesn't kill and cause tumah itself should also be tahor, which is logical, right? How are you going to go against this? And the Gemara says, well, obviously it's not true. Because you can make the same argument regarding an ordinary thorn. A thorn, just a little, a thorn that you find on a tree or on the floor, it itself can cause death, right? You can poke someone and cause them injury, cause them death. It causes tumah, but the thorn itself is not tameh. And so you see that will break the kal vachomer. And nevertheless, the point is that Rav himself was able to make such a kal vachomer, and one needs that skill in order to be on the Sanhedrin. We now elaborate on the requirement that the judges know 70 languages. Amar Rav Yudah Amar Rav, kol ir she'en ba shenayim ledaber ve'achad lishmoa, en mosherin ba Sanhedrin. Rav is saying that you don't need all 23 judges on a Sanhedrin ketana to know all 70 languages. Rather, only a subset of them. And so he says any city that does not have 2 people that know how to speak 70 languages and 1 person that knows how to understand all 70 languages, if it's less than that, then we do not put a Sanhedrin there. So that means that you don't need all 23, but rather you need 2 or 3. 2 that really know it well enough that they can speak it, and 1 who just knows 70 languages passively, who can understand them. In Medad, in fact, there were 3 such people, so they could have a Sanhedrin there. And Yavneh was even greater. They had 4 people that were able to speak all the languages, and this is their names. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Akiva, V'Shimon HaTimni, Dan Lifnehem Bakarka. 3 of them were rabbis, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Akiva. The last one, Shimon HaTimni, was not ordained as a rabbi, so he was not sitting on the bench where the judges sit, but rather he sat on the ground and he would deliberate before the judges. He was not officially a judge, but he could help out the judges and offer arguments while sitting on the floor. Most people would sit on the floor. It wasn't like weird like it is today. The students would all be sitting on the floor. So he sat on the floor, but since he knew all the languages, he could help. Challenged against Rav. Rav said, although he said 2 or 3, he said you only really need 2 that know how to speak. The third one, you could just know it passively. But you only need 2 that know how to speak all 70 languages. But according to this braita, the minimum is 3, and a court that has 3 judges that can speak every language is called a wise court. And if you have 4, there's no greater than that. Like, really don't need any more than 4. 4 is the greatest. But the point is the minimum is 3, and Rav said the minimum for speaking is 2. And so the answer is, Rav is following a different braita that says 2 people on the court that know all the languages, that's called a wise court. If you have 3, there's nothing greater than that. So really 2 who know how to speak is the minimum. Lebedin lifnei chachamim levi merebi. Now that we mentioned Shimon HaTimni, that he would deliberate in front of the judges, so now we consider other phrases that are used elsewhere in the Talmud, and it refers to someone, not explicitly, so we're going to identify who it's referring to. So anytime you see in a braita it says a certain person was deliberating before the Chachamim, it's referring actually to Levi, who was deliberating in front of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And if you find Danin Lifnei Chachamim, that these certain sages were deliberating before the sages, then that refers to Shimon ben Azai, Shimon ben Zoma, Hanan Mitzri, Hanania ben Chachinai, those 4 sages. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Matneh Chamisha. Nachman bar Yitzchak says, no, actually it's 5 sages, Shimon, Hanan v'Chananya. So it's Shimon ben Azai mentioned here, Shimon ben Zoma mentioned here, and Shimon HaTimni mentioned above, and also Hanan HaMitzri and Hananya ben Chachinai. Rabotenu shebeBavel, Rav u'Shmuel. If you ever see a phrase, the rabbis in Bavel said, it's not all the rabbis in Bavel, it's specifically Rav and Shmuel, who were the greatest of their generation in Bavel. Rabotenu shebe'Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Abba. The rabbis of Eretz Yisrael, again, it's not all the rabbis in Israel, it's specifically Rabbi Abba. Dayanei Gola, Karna. A judge of the diaspora refers to Karna. Dayanei Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Ameh, Rabbi Aseh. The judges of Eretz Yisrael refers to Rabbi Ameh, Rabbi Aseh. Dayanei de Pumpedita, Rabbi bar Shemuel. Dayanei de Nehardea, Rabbi bar Yomi. The judges of Pumpedita, that refers to Rabbi bar Shemuel, and the judges of Nehardea, specifically Ravada bar Yomi. All these people were expert judges, each in their place. Sabeh de Surah Ravuna v'Rav Chisda. The elders of Surah is Ravuna, Rav Chisda. Sabeh de Pumpedita, Rav Yudah v'Rav Aina. The elders of Pumpedita is Rav Yudah and Rav Aina. This list is important because it places these various sages in their main centers of activity. And what you could do is take these names and other names that we know and that are associated with places, and then you can map them out and see how the Torah was transmitted in a certain yeshiva in Pumpedita, in a different yeshiva in Nehardea, and often you can see patterns develop. Charife de pumbedita, the sharp ones of pumbedita is Efa and Vavimi benere Chava. Amoret de pumbedita, the speakers, this is talking about the Amorah that would stand next to the rabbi and be a human loudspeaker and explain what the rabbi was saying. Those in Pumbedita were Rabba Rav Yosef, Amor Edin Hardea, Rav Chama. Nehar Bela'e Matnu Rami Bar Berebi. The sages of Nehar Bela, that's referring to Rami Bar Berebi. Amni Berav Rav Huna. If someone quotes something in the name of the school of Rav, that's actually referring to Rav Huna, who was a prime student of Rav. Fama Rav Huna Amri Berav. Hold on. Sometimes Rav Huna himself says they say in the school of Rav, so he can't be quoting himself. Ela Rav Hamnuna, rather it's referring to Rav Hamnuna. Amri b'ma'arava, Rabbi Yirmiyah. They say in the west is Eretz Yisrael, that's referring to Rabbi Yirmiyah. Shelachu mitam, Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina. If it says they sent from there, meaning from Eretz Yisrael, a message was sent to Bavel, it's specifically Rabbi Yehuda bar Chanina who sent the message. Mechaku ala b'ma'arava, Rabbi Elazar. If you have a statement that says they laughed at this in the west, meaning someone said something in Bavel, and in Eretz Yisrael, they heard that and they laughed at it. It's not everybody, but rather to be Elazar specifically that mocked that specific opinion. We ask, hold on, one time we had a statement that says that it was sent from Eretz Yisrael according to the words of Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina. Now Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina, if he's the one that sends that message, he wouldn't be quoting himself. Ela ipuch shalchu mitam Rabbi Elazar mechaku ala b'maraba Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina. Rather, we have to switch around the names of the last two attributions. And when we say they sent from Eretz Yisrael, that's referring to Rabbi Elazar who sent that message. And when they say they laughed at him in the West, that's referring to Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina. He's the one that did not like that opinion, and so much that he even mocked it. Okay, back to the Mishnah, the last part of the Mishnah. And interesting how this whole perek is all based around one Mishnah. Actually, this was, you find this in some manuscripts, that the entire Mishnah is written at the beginning, and then the whole Gemara. So this is a case where this is the way it's found in the regular printed editions. And the entire Gemara, this goes piece by piece from the Mishnah, explaining the derivation. So it's a very neatly structured chapter, and we hope to finish the chapter in just a couple of minutes. Okay, so the question is, how many people do you need in the city that it can have a Sanhedrin of 23 people? If it's a tiny village, then obviously you don't have enough people to make up even a Sanhedrin, so you need certainly at least 23, but actually need more than that. There's two opinions. Tanakama says 120 people. Rabbi Nechemiah says 230, like Asera Asarot. If you'd imagine each of the 23 judges being in charge of 10 people, then it'd be 23 times 10. They're included in that count of 10. That was the two opinions in the Mishnah. So the Gemara asks, this number 100, 120, what is this number? Where does it come from? Why do we need 120 people in a town in order for it to be eligible to have a court of 23? And the answer is 23 people are going to be the judges themselves, the judges of 23. And then standard procedure is that the judges sit in front on benches, and then you have 3 rows of students that are there and listening and learning, and each row has 23 students in it, and there are 3 rows. And so now you have 3 rows of students of 23, plus the judges that are 23, that's 23 times 4, which gives us 92. And the city has to have 10 idle people that don't have jobs. They just sit in the Bet Knesset, and they take care of any public things that require taking care of. You always have a minyan that way. And so that brings us to 102. Ushne sofrim, you have to have 2 scribes in the Sanhedrin. One will write down everything pro and everything against. So we have 2 scribes. Ushne chazanin, 2 bailiffs. Chazan today we use as cantor, but originally it meant an official that's in charge of what's going on there. Ushne ba'ale dinin, and you have 2 litigants, because if you have a Sanhedrin but no litigants, then what's the point of a Sanhedrin? Sanhedrin. Ushne Aidim is going to be two people that will be witnesses, Ushne Zomamin, and two people that potentially at least can come and say those two witnesses weren't there at that time. Ushne Zomamin, and potentially two other people that will say that the second set of witnesses themselves weren't there to see the first set of witnesses seeing this crime. And now we have 114. Now we still need 6 more. So we're going to find the 6 more in this baraita. This baraita is going to list a whole bunch of things, and there's different ways of counting where you get the 6 more out of this list. So one way or another, V'tanya, Kol ir she'en ba asara devarim halalu en tamid chacham rashai ladur betocha. Baraita says, any city that doesn't have these 10 professions in it, a Tamid Racham is not allowed to live there. And so obviously if you have these judges, they're living in the city, they have to be allowed to live in the city, so they couldn't live there unless you have all of these jobs being fulfilled. And one is Bet Din, Makin, Ve'odshin. You need a Bet Din that has the authority to flog and punish. Well, that you already have, if you have the 23 judges, that's included. Ve'kupa shel tzedakah, nigbet b'shnaim u'mitchaleket b'shlosha. You need a charity fund, and the charity fund has to be collected by 2 people that are checking each other to make sure that they're not mishandling the funds, and has to be distributed by 3 people to make sure that they're giving away the funds to people who are really worthy, really poor. They're not wasting it away. You can count that as 3 if the 2 are included in the 3, or as 5 if they have to be different people. Ubet HaKnesset, and you need, these are institutions that you need, a synagogue, Ubet HaMilchas, a bathhouse, because otherwise how are you going to keep hygienic? Ubet HaKisei, need a bathroom, Rofeh, a doctor, Uman, a bloodletter, Lad, a scribe, Tabach, you need a kosher butcher, Umelamed Tinokot, and a school teacher. You also need to make sure that there's fruit that's being sold in the city, because fruit makes the eyes illuminated. And so, however you count the 6 more here, that's how we get to 120. Rabbi Nechemia Omer, Tanya Rabbi Omer, 277. Okay, Rabbi Nechemia said that you need 230. That's the 23 times 10. We look at each of the judges as being in charge of 10 people, including himself, and that's how he gets 230. Now, if Baraita has a different number that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, you need 277 people. Now, where did he get that from? In fact, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is building on Rabbi Nechemia. He's saying, you need the 230, but then you need 47 extra people. Why? Because let's say on the Bet Din of 23, they're judging a case and one person abstains, and then you have to add 2 more. And then those 2 that you add, one says innocent and one says guilty. Then you have to add 2 more and 2 more. And you have to keep adding until you get to a maximum of 70. And so the difference between 23 and 70 is 47. So we need an extra 47 people to live in the town, just in case we have to add more pairs to the 23 up till 70. Vatanya Rabbi Omer 278 lakashaha Rabbi Yehuda harabanan. Hold on, there's another version of the Baraita that also quotes Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, but here he has 278, one more than the 277. And the answer is no, there's no problem. The Baraita above was referring to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that a great Sanhedrin, the maximum number is 70. So that's how you get 230 plus 47 is 277. Whereas the second Braita was assuming the opinion of Rabbanan that a Sanhedrin Gedolah is 71. And so the maximum number that you would add to the 23 is 48. And so if you have 230 people altogether, including 23 judges, and then if you have to add, because one person abstains and you have to add pairs and pairs, then you'll get to a maximum of 71 by adding 48 people, and that's how you get 278. And finally, we close out the perek with a baraita tenor Rabbanan, v'samta alehem sarei alafim sarei me'ot sarei chamishim v'sarei asarot. A fitting way to close out the baraita with Yitro's advice to Moshe that you should appoint lower judges, and they should be ministers of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. So let's make a calculation. Sarei alafim shesh me'ot. There were about 600,000 people, men of those ages, counted in the census of Bnei Israel leaving Mitzrayim. And so if you have 600,000, then there will be 600 ministers over thousands. Sarei me'ot sheshet alafim, ministers of hundreds, well, that would be 6,000 people. Sarei chamishim, ministers over 50, shenem asad elef, that's 12,000 ministers of that stature. Sadeh asarot sheshet ribo, and ministers over 10 would be 60,000 people. So if you add up all of the judges from every level, nimseu dayanei Israel shiv'at ribo ushmonat alafim ve'shesh me'ot, you find 78,600 people that will be judges of various various statures that will be judges over Israel. And I think this closing out the Perek shows how important it is to have all these different levels of judges and courts to make sure that everybody will be following the rules and living a life of tzedakah u'mishpat. Hadran alach dinei mamonot.